Hi there. Apparently, some of you are having a little trouble understanding the adjusting and closing entries. And so what I've decided to do is to open up the practice assignment, get out the notes, and kind of go through them with you quickly. Well, maybe not quickly, but so that you get a better understanding, or at least I hope you do. So the reason for adjusting entries is to bring the general ledger accounts up to date. The only way we can do that is by posting journal entries. The reason that we do closing entries is to prepare our books for the next fiscal year. So you want to start with your drawing, your revenue, and expenses all equal to 0 at the start of each year so that you can determine how much money you're bringing in for revenue, how much money are you spending on telephone expense, how much money are you spending on rent, so that you can analyze stuff and determine whether or not, perhaps you should be buying a building rather than paying rent if it's too costly. So the first thing that I'm going to do with you is the adjusting entries. The adjusting entries come from the adjustments column of the worksheet, which you can see I have open on the left hand side. And what we're going to do is we're going to follow the notes, and in the notes the first thing that I ask you to do is to type adjusting entries centered, which I've already done for you. The date of our adjusting entries is the same as what you will find on the worksheet. So if you have a look at your worksheet, you will see that the date is January 31st, so that is the date that we're using. Okay, we're going to get all of the information from the adjustments column, and so we're going to start in our debit column because we always put the debits first. In our notes, it talks about bad debts expense first, so we're going to go down and look for bad debts expense, and there we have it. It's the $13 in green. Okay, so in our general journal we're going to type bad debts expense, and that amount is in the adjustments debit column, so we're going to put the total in the debit column. Then we need to find the matching credit to go along with that, and the matching credit is allowance for uncollectible accounts, and that number is in the credit column. Okay, if you're following along in our notes, the next adjusting entry is for merchandise inventory. Okay, so let's find merchandise inventory. Oh, it's a brown number. So let's go down. There's our matching brown number, or our matching amount, which is income summary. We're going to debit income summary, and we're going to credit merchandise inventory. Okay. Our third adjusting entry is for supplies. So we need to find the amount that matches with supplies, which in this case is supplies expense. So we're going to debit supplies expense, and our matching credit is going to be for supplies. Okay, I'm going to pause the video while I prepare the remaining adjusting entries, and then I'll come back and show you how to post them. Alright, as you can see, I've completed the remaining adjusting entries. There are 5 listed in our general journal, and you can see there are 5 listed in the adjustments column. So the next thing that you need to do is we need to post these journal entries to our ledgers. So I'm going to open up my ledgers. They're not going to be very big, so I'm going to have to scroll around. So the first one that we're looking for is bad debts expense. Okay, and once I've found it, account number 6100, I'm going to look and go, okay, bad debts expense is a debit, remembering that the left-hand side of an ET account is the debit. I'm going to put $13. And then in the post reference column, I'm going to put 6100 because that's where I posted it to. The next one that I'm looking for is allowance for uncollectible accounts. And the amount is in the credit column, so I'm going to put $13 in the credit column. And then the last step is to put the account number in the post reference column. Okay, as I'm going along, the next one I'm looking for is income summary. Income summary is a debit, $3,500. And it just so happens that the account number is also $3,500. That is just a coincidence. Okay, so I'm looking for merchandise inventory in my ledgers somewhere. Oh, there it is. Okay, so merchandise inventory is a credit, $3,500. You'll see that they're color coded still, just like they were in the worksheet adjustments column. That is just a coincidence that I did for you this time. Okay, once again I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to go through and post the remaining entries. Alright, so I have posted everything. I'm just going to scroll down slowly so that you can see where I have posted things and where you should have numbers. And then we are going to go back and we are going to do the closing entries. Okay, so hopefully that part has made sense to you. Now the next step that we're going to do are the closing entries. Okay, take note that I have put all of the account numbers in post reference for the adjusting entries as well. Okay, so for the closing entries we need to go back to our worksheet, because that's where we're going to get the information from. And we're going to get the information from the income statement columns and the balance sheet columns. Okay, and I kind of need all of this. We have to make this a little bigger so we can see. There we go. Okay, so the first closing entry, if you're following along in our notes, is to close the revenue account. Okay, the revenue account normally has a credit balance. So if we want to get it equal to 0, we have to do the opposite. Okay, which means that we're going to have to debit our revenue account. In this case, our revenue account is called sales, and our balance is $12,000. We need to have an account to dump all of this information into while we're preparing our closing entries. And that account that we're going to use is going to be called income summary. Okay, so we are going to use income summary as our dumping ground account. Okay, so in order to understand this, we're going to post this now. So I'm going to go to my ledgers and find sales. And our sales account is right here. Okay, and if I look, sales has a debit. So I'm going to put 12,000 on the debit side. What is my new balance going to be? My new balance for sales is now going to be 0. Okay, because the debits and credits equal, so my balance is going to be 0. The 0 is always going to end up on the side that the balance normally is on. Okay, so then I'm going to find income summary and I'm going to credit income summary for $12,000. And I'm going to put the amount in. Okay, back to the worksheet. The second closing entry is to close the expense accounts as well as our purchases account. Okay, all of those have a debit balance. And so what we need to do is we need to credit all of our expenses to make them equal to 0. So we have to debit our income summary account, which is our dumping ground. And this number is going to be the total of all of these numbers that I'm highlighting for you. Okay, so unfortunately we can't use a formula key to get that. But when I add them up, it equals 6903. And then I'm going to list all of my expenses as well as my purchases account, and I'm going to put them in the credit column. So once again, I'm going to pause the video while I type these out. And then I'll come back to you. Alright, so I have all of the expenses typed in and I've credited all of them. And so the next step, once again, is we need to post them. Okay, so we need to go back to our ledgers. Our first one is income summary. We need to debit income summary for 6903. And then we're going to put in the account number. Okay, then we're looking for purchases, 3250, and our new balance for purchases is going to be 0. Okay, just a reminder again, the 0 goes on the side that the balance would normally be found on. Okay, we have credit card fee expense and the balance is going to be 0. And we have the amount. Oops, 6250. Rent. Salaries expense. And our last one is supplies expense. And I'm going to cheat and put the account number in first, which you really shouldn't do. Alright, hopefully that helped you out. Our next closing entry is to record the net income or net loss. Okay, so we need to look at our worksheet to determine if we have a net income or a net loss. Our net income, according to our worksheet, is $1,597. Okay, we have 2 owners, and so we're always going to assume that that amount gets divided equally. If we have a net income, we need to add to capital. In order to add to capital, we must credit it. So we're going to debit our income summary for the total of net income. Okay, and I'm just going to put a little note over here that says total net income. Okay, and that should not be indented. And then we're going to divide that net income equally between the owners. So James Fields receives half of $1,597, as does Rhonda Mason. Okay, and then once again we're going to go to our ledgers and post. So we're going to look for income summary, and we're going to put in our $1,597. Once we have that amount in, we can check the balance of our income summary account by adding everything on the debit side and subtracting the credit side. So I'm going to add these 3 and subtract this number, and I should end up with 0. Okay, then we're going to look for James Fields Capital, and we're going to give him $798.50. And his account number is 3100. And we're going to look for Rhonda Mason and do the same for her, $798.50. Oops, 3300. Okay, we have 2 more entries to make. Our next entry is to close the drawing account of our partners. Okay, in order to do that, you're going to have to debit capital because we want to show that James Fields has taken money out of his business, and he's taken $1,000 out. And we want to close our drawing account. So in order to close that, we need to credit our drawing account for $1,000. Okay? And I'm also going to add a little note over here that says amount of drawing. I'm going to do that for both of them. So that seems to be a common mistake. Okay, so we're going to find James Fields drawing or capital first of all, and we're going to debit it $1,000. And then we're going, oops, that's not the right account number. James Fields drawing is 3100. And James Fields drawing is 3200. Okay, so the balance of our drawing account is now 0. And we can determine the balance of James Fields Capital by adding the credits and subtracting the debit. Okay, now we need to do the same entry for Rhonda Mason. And so I'm just going to pause the video, prepare that, and post. Okay, so once I have them posted, once I have them posted, I need to remember that I have to put the account numbers in here. And then we're going to go back and figure out our balance for Rhonda Mason Capital. Okay, we're going to add the credits and subtract the debit. Okay, and there's our balance. The last step is to prepare a post-closing trial balance. Okay, and so what a post-closing trial balance is it lists all of your accounts that still have a balance. Okay, and we can't be lazy, we need to actually write them all out here. So I'm creating new balances for all of my accounts. And then we're going to use these new balances and we're going to prepare the post-closing trial balance from that. And I'm quickly going to get this done. Oops. And you see we have James Fields Capital done, drawing is equal to 0, Rhonda Mason Capital is done, and the remaining of our accounts should all be equal to 0. Okay, so we are going to take the account names from our ledgers to prepare our post-closing trial balance. Okay, and once again, oops, I'm going to get you started here. J&R Giftware, post-closing trial balance, and the date is January 31st, 2012. Remember, we must format that date. date so that our month is written out. And then we must merge and center our columns across to C. Okay, so I'm going to begin by writing out the account name and the balance. And while I do this, I'm going to pause the video and I'll be back. Alright, so I have all of the account names typed in and I've gotten them from the ledgers. I'm going to make them all into currency with 2 decimal places and no $sign. And then we're going to add up our columns and they should equal. And they don't because I've typed something in incorrectly. This is not a good thing to be displaying. And okay, one moment while I pause the video and determine my error. Alright, so I determined my error. When I looked at Rhonda Mason Capital, it should be 53,363 and I typed 53. So I just need to fix that. And there we go, now it works. Okay, once they equal, you're going to double rule or double underline and your document is complete. I hope this helps you understand adjusting and closing entries.